Networking is an investment in your business. It takes time, and when done correctly, can yield great results for years to come, says Diane Helbig. This sentiment embodies the journey that Helen Nicholson has traveled and the lessons that have made her part of the zeitgeist of corporate South Africa. Helen is called the networking queen. She began her career as an accountant. She has evolved into the founder and chief excitement officer of the networking company, which specializes in training professionals on soft skills such as personal branding, networking, and mindfulness, which are essential power skills to advance people's careers. I'm excited to have Helen as my guest on this episode of Wisdom Personified, Conversations with Dudu Msomi. Helen, thank you so much for finally making the time.
I'm very excited to be here.
So we met as adults, so I don't think we've ever spoken about like real childhood. So where were you born? Do you have siblings? What were your pastimes when you were a kid before the teen years? I'm more interested in that part.
So I was born in Edenvale on the East Rand in Gauteng. I am the oldest of 4 children. My mother's a teacher. My father is an artist. And
interesting.
My favorite pastimes, probably reading. I was an avid reader.
And still are?
Yes, that's one thing that hasn't changed. But I used to read a lot of those photo magazines.
Oh,
you know, those dreadful,
yeah.
you don't get them anymore, but I used to love them. And there was a whole lot of girls' magazines that used to come out. I really enjoyed them. And when I was reflecting on this period of my life, I realized that I started a kind of girls group. We were probably about 8 or 9 years of age, called Blue Tots. So I was mobilizing my friends, and we would go on outings. We went to see the Simba Chip Factory.
Oh gosh,
and
nice.
You know, I really realized, I think at that age, for some reason, that there was power in the collective.
Yeah.
So that was a lot of fun. And then probably, you know, up until my teen years, I've always had a strong desire to work and earn money because I like nice things. And I realized my parents were not going to be able to support that.
Teacher and art.
So we went to Edgar's in Eastgate when we were 13, and we said we were 16. And at that stage, they didn't even ask for hobbies or whatever. And we started working on a Saturday morning.
Wow.
And there were three of me and my 2 friends.
Yeah.
And in fact, one of them is now the head of Tom Ford in New York.
Oh my God.
As a result of that job that we all started at 13.
Golly gosh, hey. Wow, that's so interesting. Merchandising.
Well, we were selling cosmetics.
Yeah.
And I think everyone should spend some time in the service industry.
They should.
It humbles you.
It does. Well, I mean, I enjoyed it because I was part of the retail management trainee for the Edcon group with the idea of getting there. And so they used to rotate different departments. And every time, because I don't think I'm a seller, so I used to like 200% profit all the time. And then they kept on rotating me, and I was like, that was a part of me but I found that's because of my honesty, because I used to be quite honest, and the clients used to like that. So
all roads lead back to Edgar's.
You know? So you qualified as an accountant.
Yeah, I didn't go right up to CA. I did up to honors.
Honors. What vision did you have for your life that influenced your choice of study, even that? You went to Wits?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah.
I didn't know what I wanted to do, and I was quite good at accounting and maths, which was quite strange, actually, looking back on what I'm doing now. But what was interesting, it was a good foundation. I didn't enjoy my university career. It was one of the first times I'd come from an all-girls school. So from grade 1 to matric, I'd been at a very small all-girls convent.
Yeah.
And then suddenly to go into this world where I think 5% or 10% of the class were girls as a BCom student. I felt very invisible. It was the first time I realized that, you know, there are a lot of opinionated men out there who feel very comfortable with, you know, putting up their hands and making contributions. And I didn't feel comfortable with that at all. So it was an interesting period of life. I wasn't, it certainly wouldn't have been me in my groove. I didn't like what I was studying, but I didn't know what the alternative was. So I just thought it's probably a good baseline to have. And interestingly enough, it has served me well because I used to audit during my varsity holidays for a small auditing company. And they used to do the books for kind of some small restaurants. And so I learned a lot about how a small business operates. So I can still read income statements and balance sheets and instinctively know when something's off.
Yeah, when the patterns are not quite adding up. That's what I enjoy about financial statements, actually. What do you think your unique value proposition is? If you were not here tomorrow, how would the world be poorer for not having you in it?
I think I was put on this world, I was born to teach and to see the lights gone in people's eyes. That's my purpose. But I think in addition to that, and that's why I run and am passionate about networking, is because I love connecting the dots between people.
Yeah.
I've facilitated 3 marriages, and
I wonder why you haven't facilitated mine.
Okay, we'll chat to you. You've got to give me your list.
I don't even have one, but anyway.
You see, that's the problem. Also lots of people in jobs, and I was in recruitment for a little while, and I loved it. There's nothing better than someone speaking about a need, and then someone who can fill that need or fill that need. And still, a lot of clients contact me, and I do it kind of just as for fun.
Yeah,
it's saying I think, and I often send out emails to 2 people and say, you 2 need to go and have coffee.
Yeah.
There's synergy in terms of your business. And I'm not spelling out a whole reason why. Just trust me that there's synergy.
Yeah. Where in the Middle East did you live? Because you lived somewhere.
Dubai.
Yeah. What did living away from home, your home country, teach you about yourself?
So it was a tough period. We moved. So I just got married at 25. So 3 months after we got married, he was transferred to Dubai. He was a British guy and he worked for an American company, and they were transferring 70 people from all over the world as Dubai was going to be their new hub. So I suddenly became an expat wife, which was very odd. I realized I was not destined to be an expat wife because you go to coffee mornings and these women bake stuff and they do stuff which I'm hugely impressed with, but I realized I'm not that person. And the first question they all ask you is, what does your husband do? In other words, your worth is determined by what he does. So it was a very strange period. But I started to work there. I worked for a big IT company, Novell. And then I got pregnant with twins in 1997. So we'd been in Dubai for 2 years.
Yeah.
And so I had my twins there. So to be a 27-year-old mother of twins with no family, and I had amazing friends, though, the expat network, because you're all in the same boat. And if it hadn't been for kind of, especially my American and English friends, they were just phenomenal. And, but I really didn't know much about what I was doing. So in terms of the epiphanies about me, I think it taught me great courage. And it also taught me about what it is to be South African, because I missed home on a visceral level.
Yeah.
Like no one can, I know a lot of people leave South Africa and seem to transition very easily. I did not. I was terribly homesick and it got worse.
Yeah.
And every time I came home, typically the expat women, they come for the summer there, so winter here. And I remember the last time I came for 3 months and my mom was taking a sabbatical from teaching. And the twins were kind of about 18 months, so they were starting to be really fun. They were like really developing their own personality. And it was very hard to go back because I found Dubai, it's less so now, but I think at that stage, we're talking, just before 2000, so 1999, it was a very soulless place. Someone said to me, when you go to the Middle East, often there's a beautiful wrapper, but there's nothing inside. And that was my experience, because it's such a transitory place. Yeah. People come and go. So I think those were the big things for me. I think it taught me a lot of courage and it taught me what I want and what I don't want. And I really realized that I was not cut out to be an expat wife. And I also wanted my children to be South African. I wanted them to have roots, because what I noticed about expat children is they move school to school, every kind of 2 or 3 years. And the parents are one nationality, they live all over the world, and they actually in the end don't even know who they are. And I wanted my children to go to the same school, to have the roots that I had.
Yeah.
And it was a good decision. My ex-husband's career flourished, because he could actually then go to the oil refineries, which is where he's actually at his best. And I came home, and I have no regrets whatsoever.
Wow, that's a story in itself, eh? So you are now on your second marriage. How did divorce, which society can perceive as a failure, impact your perception of yourself, if at all?
I have never seen divorce as a failure. Both my ex-husband and I, and he will attest to that fact, we still have a decent relationship. We've co-parented our children. He's always been very good financially, and he's been a good dad. So, we both went to see the lawyer together. The whole divorce cost 300 Rand. Wow. It was uncontested. There was no drama. And I think there's a very special place in hell for men who don't support their children, and in turn for women who turn their children against their fathers. Because the children get caught up. They're the ones who suffer the most. So I think we both realized that our lives just were going in completely different directions, what he wanted and what I wanted. And often what you want at 25 is not what you want at 30 or even 35. So we were very young to be making such life-changing decisions. And so I was a single mom for probably at least 10, 12 years. Probably some of the most difficult times I've been through, because raising twins on your own is not for the faint-hearted. But I met my new husband when the girls were 13, and he doesn't have children. So, it was quite a shock to meet a woman with twins. Yeah. And so we never lived together until the girls went to university, and then we did our version of a marriage about 7 years ago. So, we've been together all in all about 13 years. And I think you get married to have children. So we've done a kind of promise commitment ceremony, and we redo our vows every year. So we commit for a year and a day. And then we go to an interesting location. Each year we get a choice. The last year we were in KZN, in fact, during the floods.
Oh.
Yes, it was quite dramatic. So I'm not sure what it portends exactly. If there's a natural disaster when you're in the middle of trying to do your waves on the beach and all stuff is happening around you. So and then that was his choice. So I'm taking him away next year. And it's a special thing because we recommit. Yeah, because I think often marriages can get, you forget your vows, and we have KPIs. Yeah. Like for the next year, I need this from you. I'm happy to do this, and we renegotiate our contract.
It's very engaged. I like that. Yeah, it's conscious. What advice would you give someone who's watching, who has surrendered to a life of unhappiness in marriage, and is petrified to explore any other path to happiness?
So I think I would say to them that Nelson Mandela got divorced twice. And I think you've also got to look at what your values are. We get one life. And I think you need to look at whether you believe you deserve happiness, because it is a deserving issue. And you often find that women, because of lack of self-esteem, they don't believe that, if my husband doesn't drink and he doesn't hit me and he is a vaguely decent father, then, they have to put up with that. Yes. And I think a lot of our parents' generation would, in other words, he ticks a lot of boxes, so therefore you can't really complain about it. I mean, I think our generation is different. Yeah. I think I'd like to think we're more conscious, and I think we want more. So, you've got to think of, are you feeling that your needs are being met? And in addition to that, it's your needs being met, because unfulfilled needs lead to unhappy relationships over time. There's no doubt. But the second thing is, if you have children, I think you're teaching them terrible things about relationships, in the sense that you've got to suck it up and put up with it. For the children. Yeah. When in fact, the best example you can give to your children is a loving, happy relationship. Yeah. And if it's not that, then I think children understand that. And I think you're actually giving them a gift by splitting.
Yeah. Because then you're saying that marriage without love is okay. How sad. So you have been called the networking queen. Why did you choose networking as your core service when you established the networking company in 2007?
So there was an incident that happened in Malawi when I was 20. So I grew up in a family where my parents didn't know people who knew people. So they were not connected. And this would translate practically when there was a household repair to be done. For example, they would consult the old-fashioned yellow pages. Remember that big brick, pre-Google? Yes. And they would go through and they'd find a contractor to come and repair the roof. And because it wasn't based on recommendations or referrals via word of mouth, often that person would mess up the job. And my parents didn't have money to keep on repeating household repairs. And they would get ripped off often. And when I went to school, I noticed that there was another way of doing things. And there was a friend of mine who had a father who was very connected. He knew people who knew people.
Yeah.
And what was fascinating is another friend of mine and I went backpacking through Malawi and Zimbabwe at the end of 2020. I mean, so we were 20.
Yeah, 20 years old, yeah.
Yeah. And in Zimbabwe, we knew some people because the whole trip, we were away for 8 weeks and the whole trip cost 600 Rand. If that gave you any indication of how we roughed it. We put on our backpacks, we caught local transport, we were on the back of trucks with chickens and goats, and we stayed at very rural places. But in Malawi, we got into a really bad situation, which potentially was very dangerous. We arrived in Blantyre, and at that stage, they had a traveling bank where you would swap money, especially in the rural areas. Yeah. And we had missed the traveling bank. We got our timetables wrong. And we arrive in Blantyre and we've got no money. So it's two young 20-year-old girls. We don't speak the language. There are no cell phones at that time, and we didn't have credit cards because we hadn't started working yet.
Yeah.
And the head of the manager of the Backpackers Lodge said to us, we're allowed to make one phone call. And I had to think very carefully about who I was going to phone because I couldn't phone my parents because I knew they didn't know people who knew people.
Yeah. Wow.
And I made the phone call to this friend of mine at school's father, who I knew people. And within an hour, $50 arrived in cash to our Backpackers Lodge. And that was the first time I realized that when you have a network of people around you, you can solve most of your problems. Yeah. In other words, even if you don't know, there are other people who know. And that was like the first, it's always interesting. Yeah. Yes, exactly. It's like Hansel and Gretel. That was the first seed that there actually is a different way of running your life, of surrounding yourself with connections where you help them, they help you. And then I was exposed, when I came back from Dubai, I worked at Wits Business School. And there I was exposed to a very interesting piece of research, which said it had just been done at one of the big banks here. Yeah. And what they did is they looked at men and women at quite a senior level in the organization, and they wanted to find out why the men were being promoted over the women. And then they found that for some reason, the men were overtaking the women. And when they did some research, they found out that factor was the difference in the size of their business networks. So if for example, I was a man and I was diagnosed with testicular cancer, I would tell nobody or maybe one person in my close circle of family and friends, but the men had a much bigger business network. So of, acquaintances within the bank that they could pick up the phone and phone to. Italia Bonanelli did this research. Yeah. And then they looked at women, and if either of us were diagnosed with cancer, we would tell between 4 and 8 people in our close circle of family and friends. So it's much bigger than the man's intimate network, but our acquaintance network was very lacking. So we only had 11 to 15 people, and the males had 50 to 70. And that was like a eureka moment. Yeah. And what I realized is that this differential was trainable, because I then started to investigate this, and we launched a women's leadership program at Wits Business School way back then. And I actually realized that people can be taught the skill, just as I had learned it kind of by watching people. And I started interviewing people, and I realized that they had similar traits in common. And when people have similar traits in common, as in they were all good networkers, but they all did similar things, then that is a skill set that can be trained.
And transferred.
Yeah. And that's really where it came from.
Came out, yeah. I remember I did a study also on networking. But the whole thing, the one thing that's just fascinating is a guy will not be in touch with you for like 10, 15 years. And then when he needs something, pick up the phone and ask. a woman will kind of say, they're going to ask me, where was I? And also when we answer, it's like, who the heck does she think she is?
Exactly.
A totally different attitude, but anyway.
And men are entirely comfortable with that. Very transactional.
Anyway, I think we all have to learn as women, really, just like help. I just think also just help, even if somebody hasn't been in touch with you. If they ask for help, just give them the help. So inspired by the quote that says, a statue has never been built in honor of a critic. You said no one ever erected a statue to a getter. What did you mean?
Well, the biggest thing that all good connectors and networks have in common is they all are generous. They operate with an open palm. They operate with a spirit of abundance. So they don't keep score. They give generously. And that's why I included that quote in my first book. In other words, if you're going to learn something about networking, go out and give generously. I'm not talking about giving.
Yeah.
Because there are some people who then get abused, and other people just take from them. But I'm talking about giving in a spirit that at some stage you will also get back. But it's not, networking is never 50-50. It's not you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. It's going out to the world believing that there is an abundance of resources. It means that you're happy when good things happen to other people.
Yes.
Because you believe there is enough for all of us.
For all of us, yeah.
And if you approach with that open palm, then you will have great things happen, and you will make good connections, because it's karmic. And I mean, you've observed that, I've observed it, and anyone who's been around for a couple of years knows that.
I feel it. So networking, the networking company is a business, but you also service other businesses. As entrepreneurs, we can neglect our own businesses, concluding that servicing clients will guarantee the sustainability of our own businesses. Can you share one wisdom that you believe a business should never neglect to increase its chances of profitability and longevity?
So I have two, if that's okay.
Uh-huh.
So the one is, I think in the coaching, consulting, leadership, speaking, podcasting, authoring space, there is a tendency as people get more senior in their career to start believing their own PR. And I think humility, that to approach everyone as a person, and to not, in other words, people start to get very precious about a lot of things that I don't think necessarily deserve to be precious about. Be real and be vulnerable and be humble. So that is, and I think if you are that, you attract great clients, you attract good. In other words, it's the mindset in which the networking company has been built. The second pillar is that whenever we make a change to anything in our business, so in other words, we having a problem, or there's an issue, or we're growing, which we have, then I put the delegate's development at the center of everything that we do. So in other words, if it's good for the delegate, not necessarily the client, but the client will benefit if the delegate benefits. So in other words, by putting the delegate's development at the center of everything that we do, and when we put that sorts everything out, because it's not for the good of our team, it's not for the good of me, it's not for the good of another service provider, it's the delegate.
Yeah.
Then the whole ecosystem works.
Because really we have no business without the income coming, and the income comes because the delegates want to.
And also I mean, our first client though is our team. Like our we have a team of 15 now full-time people, and we have 7 program managers who manage all the programs. And they are, I always see my role as a kind of, I used to speak about this, and then I realized that this is fairy dust.
Yeah.
Because something happens in our business and on those programs where people grow and develop, and then they would go, we don't know what happened, and then we termed it fairy dust. So I took on the role as fairy godmother, and I've got, when I did a personal branding exercise, I actually have a wand, which was a lot of fun to do from a branding perspective. But I give the fairy dust and the wand to the program managers. They then hand it over to the delegates, and then the delegates have a responsibility to pass it on. Because the only way we're going to grow South Africa is by this transfer of skills.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. So corporate South Africa is a fairly risk-averse environment, I think, about talent. Financial literacy usually equals chartered accountant, even when it comes to board position, which I think is ridiculous. You're an accountant with a business in the soft skill space, as we would say it. What wisdom can you share with corporate South Africa, using yourself as an example of how they can see talent?
So I think talent comes in lots of different forms. I think that sometimes corporates can be quite linear in terms of, because corporate is about advancing in your career. You go from different levels. So there's a certain level, I think, that they will start to formally develop talent. I would say widen that pool, because often you can find the most amazing resources, in the receptionist sitting at your, reception desk. And often there's untapped value and opportunities for people that I think needs to have a wider lens. But I think probably the biggest change that I've observed, and I think corporates have gotten much better at this, is that they're leading much more from the heart, I think, since COVID. There's definitely been a shift into these so-called soft skills, because, I've been talking about mindfulness for kind of 15 years. And someone said to me, Helen, you've been banging on about this forever. And he said, I finally got it, during COVID.
Because they were ready. Yeah.
So I think because people have suffered and people have taken strain, that I think they've realized that the soft skills are actually the hard skills.
Yeah.
And the soft skills are how people are going to develop. Technical skills increasingly are irrelevant.
Yeah. But we've still very much stuck on what you qualified for is what you should be doing. And it's kind of like, at board level, we're looking for diversity, but you will never really see diversity except when it's race or gender. But in terms of competencies, I don't think we've been able to really define what competencies are required to do what. So you can take that receptionist and put them somewhere else because you've identified what the competence is.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's the missing link.
No, indeed. And I also think people need to push themselves more dramatically. Now that AI is right here, for all of us to grapple with, I think that you've got to keep relevant. And so I set myself a relevancy quotient goal every year, personally and professionally. So and I do things that are hard. So this year, personally, my husband and I are learning how to dance. And I can tell you, it is not going very well. We are now in kind of end of August.
Yeah.
It's been incredibly hard for both of us because we are very badly coordinated. So I deliberately picked something that was very challenging. So, people have, because I think that often our lives get quite
comfortable.
Yes. And we that comfort doesn't make your brain fire. So I've done some AI courses. I have a freezing cold shower every morning now after my bath. So I jump into that.
I just did. I don't just straight to the cold.
Well, you start to get used to it.
Yeah.
I have a friend who's dying of pancreatic cancer at the moment in Cape Town. And, and I realized that your relevancy increases when you've got a good why. In other words, why am I doing this?
Yeah.
Because often I see people in corporate, when you say to them, expand your skill set. They often, I don't think their why is strong enough.
Yeah.
And I realized that because I don't want to get cancer and I want to reduce my inflammation and I want to think of her also and almost pay tribute to her every morning. That's why I get into that cold water. And then that makes it easier. Yeah. I've started doing, I'm having comedy coaching. So I've got a stand-up comedian coaching me.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure if you can tell if I've become funnier since you saw us last. And I can tell you I have not. But what's interesting is the 8th, so he's doing 7 lessons with me. We're on lesson number 3.
Yeah.
And on the 8th one, I've got to stand up.
You have to go to a public show.
Some pub somewhere. And go. Now that is pushing me out of my comfort zone. And I think everyone has to do
something that pushes. Yeah. How has your perspective evolved about why you believe you are in this world before you had children to how you view your life journey with them in it?
To my earlier point about don't believe your own PR, I think when you have teenage daughters, especially, or teenagers around you, whether they're your nephews or nieces or anyone that you know, I think they are very, they keep you real and they keep you grounded. So for me, that's what children have done. You can't have any airs and graces when you have teenagers around you, because they bring you down to earth. And
there will be a comment.
They'll tell you that you're uncool, and they tell you that you don't look the part, and they're very honest. And I think, so without children, I think I wouldn't have had that kind of mirror.
So your twins are Sabrina and Caitlin. What is the biggest misconception about twins, and what has raising the twins taught you about individuality? I'm always fascinated about that.
Well, I think it helps now because Sabrina lives in London and Caitlin is in the business with me. And they're living very different lives. Sabrina is single in London and kind of partying, and she's working very hard. And Caitlin has just gotten married.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
She's converting to Judaism.
Yeah.
So they're living very different lives. So one is a lot more kind of settled and wanting to buy kitchen appliances, and the other one is still, you know. So I think the physical location has helped a lot. But I think, to your question, I think the misperception about twins is that people have such a desire to compare identical twins. They'll always, even from when they were small, they wonder, who's the naughty one, and who's the clever one, and who's the... Meanwhile, they would always take it in turns. As soon as I even if I just did it in my head, I'd put a label on the one, then they'd change. So they were taken in turns to be...
mischievous.
Yes.
Yeah.
And they were very seldom mischievous together, which I think was a saving grace. But I think, you know, to have them develop. I remember when I was still dating their dad, we used to go to Sandton City on a Saturday morning for breakfast. And there was an old set of identical woman twins that were probably in their late 60s. And they used to walk around Sandton City every Saturday morning. They used to dress the same. And they were obviously both married, but then they would come together in the same outfits in their late 60s. And it was quite sad to see that, because they hadn't clearly individuated.
Yeah.
And Sabrina and Caitlin, I think, have done that successfully. They look quite different now because they've got different hairstyles. And although, I mean, there are times they are identical twins, but they live very different lives. And they've got, I mean, a lot of people that Sabrina knows in London didn't even know she was a twin. So it hasn't become as defining as it was when they were at school.
It's an interesting, I've just interviewed twins, so I'm very...
Identical ones?
Well, they're not, they're fraternal.
Okay.
So, but it's a fascinating thing about how, because I think it's also my study in terms of diversity. Because when you look at twins, and then you can transfer that lesson into the general population. So you did say that your daughter is now working, Caitlin, in the business. What wisdom can you share about how you navigate that relationship with your daughter, particularly setting boundaries as a mother and boss in one, so that other employees don't feel otherwise?
It's been very hard. We've been coached 3 times. So we've been in business together now for 4 years. And we've got an amazing coach, and she's worked with us 3 times. And I think probably the biggest takeaway is where we are at our best, because at our best, we do complement each other. I'm the visionary founder entrepreneur. I can see where we're going. And she's the Enneagram 3 implementer. She's very methodical, much more, I'm a lot more chaotic than she is. So, but I think my biggest takeaway from coaching, and I've said this to other family businesses or, you know, parents who work with their children, is you've got to be, you know, the transactional analysis, the parent-adult-child, is there's such a tendency at work to go into that. I can be a critical parent, she becomes a rebellious child, and we can, you know, alternate in that. But where we are at our best is to go to the adults. In other words, what is best, we place our mother-daughter relationship above everything else, and we will never do anything to jeopardize that. And we've got to sort out business stuff if it affects that. And the way we sort it out is by staying in that adult space. So I found that probably the most helpful tool.
I got a feeling there's a book that should be written after 5 years of working together about that. Because they are family-owned businesses, and that's why they don't get past the next generation, because we don't really get that foundation right.
Yeah, and it's work. It's I've said that to other people I know, because often they think it should just naturally evolve, but it's not. And the problem is that the stakes are high. They're actually much higher. You can't fire your daughter, or she couldn't fire me. It's, in other words, you in this together, so you've got to make it work, and you've also got to make it pleasant for the other people around us. So, but I think probably a second level of that is, in addition to working in that adult space, is that we are very conscious. We've got different things to do. So I know what my lane is now, and she's doing quite different stuff.
Yeah.
So we almost working in two different units of the business, which helps.
In your strengths, working out. What is the one decision you wish you had never made in life, and why?
I don't have a lot of regrets, actually, but one of the regrets is that I never learned a musical instrument. I wish I had as a child, or another language. And I wish I was more physically active as a child. I started running, doing Pilates, yoga, only probably 30s, 40s. And
that's when I stopped, because I was very active.
Oh, really?
Up to 35.
No, you see, my Pilates instructor said to me, she thought I had low muscle tone as a child. And she said, did you do a lot of exercise? I mean, our school was quite an academic school. Oh. So, we used to run a bit, but there was very little hockey, any of that kind of stuff. And I regret that, because I think it's a great foundation.
I used to love aerobics. I was at aerobics and cool.
Were you then leggings?
And clinetics and I used to love that kind of thing. But you can still at least do the musical instrument. Some of your stuff you can still do.
I've realized that I've got very bad coordination, and I think like when you miss out on that period as a child, I mean, that's what I'm seeing with the dancing. I find it hard to move hands and arms together. So doing piano would be quite challenging. Even touch typing was something I only learned over COVID.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure about that.
Okay. So you've authored 3 books. How do you handle writer's block or moments of creative uncertainty?
I had an amazing grandmother who died when I was 16. And I remember her words of wisdom, and I've used this whenever I get to a block in any area. And she said, when you're stuck, use both hands.
Oh, cute.
So, in other words, knit, cook, bake, garden,
whatever
do
it is,
something with both hands. And
it's almost like you connect to your left and right brain. Wow.
And it was such a beautiful piece of advice. Yeah. Because it's because she was a very handy woman. She was always, doing, she used to knit and crochet and do all sorts of things. And I do a lot of knitting and things now. And so as soon as I hit a block, even if I'm working on a proposal or I'm doing something at work, then I'll stop and then I do something with both my hands. So in other words, you get out of your head, get into your body. Yeah. And then you come back to it.
Wow. Okay, I'll think about that. I think a block is when I'm not able to write something within the next 5 seconds. It's like, it should just flow. It just flow. What is the best advice you've ever received? What did it say and from whom?
Maya Angelou has an amazing quote where she says, people show themselves to you the first time, believe them. Yeah.
And we keep on trying to see the other side. Yeah.
And I would say only in my 40s did I really, because in other words, when people fundamentally realize that your value systems are not aligned, like move away, run, in fact. And I didn't. Yeah. And I should have.
My mom used to say, why do you write the ending? Like, because they've shown who they are. So how am I going to be like wasting time on that? But anyway.
Yeah, you were wiser than me. You got it earlier.
What are your 2 dream guests for dinner, alive or dead, and to have great conversation and wine with? And why them?
So I've always been, being Helen I've never met wimpy Helens. if you think of, as Helen of Troy, in our own country, there was Helen Suzman as dear old Helen Zillow, wouldn't be my favorite, but anyway, she's a ballsy woman. So Helen and I've always been intrigued by the story of Helen of Troy. I've always wanted to meet Helen Suzman because she was this lone, voice in Parliament. And I thought she was so courageous.
Yeah.
So I would have loved to have her. And then if I had to pick another one, it would actually be a couple. So there would be 3 at this dinner party. Yeah. It would be Michelle and Barack Obama.
Okay.
Because I think Barack Obama, I've told my husband he would be my hall pass star. I listened to his audiobook, This Promised Land. And in fact, it's like 39 hours. I mean, we went to the Karoo, we came back, and there's something very intimate about someone's voice.
Yeah.
And I just think he is such a phenomenal human being. And I think they've got an amazing marriage. And I think I think the person who's going to save the day in American politics is her, but I don't think she'll ever go down that route.
After being First Lady, I think she's had enough.
Because they're both just so interesting, and I think they're funny. And I also think they don't take themselves so seriously.
Seriously, yeah. What book would you recommend to our audience and why?
So the business book that's had the biggest impact on me, business-wise, is Deep Work. So by a guy called Cal Newport, about the concept of doing mindful, conscious work. But I practice deep work now. So I think we're in a world where we constantly task switching. So on our WhatsApp, we're doing our emails popping in, you do an Excel spreadsheet. And what emerged when I did the research for my mindfulness book was that your brain doesn't like multitasking. Your brain is a single processing unit. It likes doing one thing well at a time because it makes you happier and it makes you more productive. So whenever I have at least one period of 90 minutes during a day that I work, and that's when I work in Microsoft offline, I put off my phone and I'll do one task for 90 minutes. And our whole team works like this. And I mean, it sounds so basic. I mean, this is not splitting the atom, but it's amazing how very few people are working in that deep work space.
Yeah. We think we get more done.
And the problem is these constant dopamine hits that we're getting, they don't serve us because the thinking that I think we are going to be needing to deal with AI and the changing world, we've got to go deep. And to go deep, you've got to go to that problem-solving space in your brain that it isn't being yanked around by your phone and by YouTube and whatever. And you've got to give it space to do that.
Yeah.
And I think the companies and the people who are able to do deep work are going to be the ones that survive and thrive post, all this kind of changing world we're busy going through.
Yeah.
So deep work would be one that's had as the most significant impact on me. But I think the second thing, and I find people are surprised when I say this, is that I read a lot of fiction. And people are like, but what's the value in that? But it's amazing how many, and especially younger people, just say to me they don't see the value in it. And I think that's a pity.
I'm fascinated. Even when you watch a soap, I mean, to arrest somebody's attention, how does the writer be able to, some go for decades? It's like, I couldn't do that kind of writing. It fascinates me. But maybe it's because I'm a writer on another level. So
yes. But I think that I mean, I can be sitting and I'm in Iran. I mean, I'm listening to an audiobook. So I've always got an audiobook, a business book, and a physical book on the go at the same time. And the audiobook I'm listening to at the moment is all about kind of the first plague in the 10th century and someone training to be a doctor. I mean, while I'm driving to see you at the Houghton Hotel.
It's a different world.
Completely.
And you're immersed in it.
And it's such a joy. And
my gosh, look at us.
No, well, hopefully we'll inspire people to read fiction because I just think it is such a joy.
Yeah. I love all kinds of reading. So as we wrap up, what wisdom would you like to leave us with? If this was the last conversation you ever have,
wow,
what would you like us to remember?
So I think, the 3 values of our business are my 3 values. And they are things that I believe to be important, to be mindful. What I worry about after COVID is I'm not sure we've learned anything. because everyone is just
We
running
just
around.
went back. We've just run back to pre-2019, yeah?
And, even now when you speak about like what happened during COVID, like let's remember it. It was a terrible, terrible time.
Yeah.
And there were some time bombs that were planted in people's careers, in their relationships, in their health, in so many ways. And so mindfully pay attention to your life. I mean, I had an interesting example this last week. On Sunday night, I got food poisoning. And, I don't think I've ever had such bad food poisoning in my life. I mean, it was just horrific. And for 2 days, I shook and I shivered. But what I realized is, Helen, that was a mindfulness exercise, because I have not been paying attention to how I've been eating. We've been really busy. So there've been a lot of Uber Eats, eating out at restaurants, not curating our fridge or our kitchen as I like it normally to be. And I realized that life whispers to you. And if you don't listen to the whisper, it starts to shout. And that shout that I got last Monday was a food poisoning whack over the head to say, Helen, pay attention.
Pay attention.
So mindfulness, are there any red flashing lights on your dashboard that you need to be paying attention to around health, relationships, work, whatever it is? Gutsiness. I believe that fortune favors the brave. Put up your hand for risky assignments. Even if you don't believe that you can do them, back yourself. And I believe that bravery is a muscle. I think you start off with small things and you build it up. And the last thing is the mantra for not this book. My next one is Networking for Introverts, and the third one will be No One is Coming. Because it's one of the things we teach is no one is coming to save you. You are the one you have been waiting for.
Yeah.
And I think people spend a lot of time as people in waiting. They wait for husbands or partners to pick them. They wait for bosses to recognize their talent. And when you realize no one is coming to save you, you are the one, there's a great sense of liberation around that.
And people misunderstand the thing that you are the one. It doesn't mean you don't call upon people.
Indeed.
But at least craft some way forward so that the angels in your life know exactly how to help you. Because if you're not sure what you want to do, how are people going to know what they must do for you?
Exactly. Yeah. I told my mom, who's just turned 80, that, we teach people that no one is coming. And she said to me, Helen, I wouldn't pay you 5 cents to teach me. She says, I think that's so depressing. And I said, Mom, it's not depressing. It's actually very liberating, because in other words, then there's a higher degree than of personal responsibility on you. Instead of you relying on, and I think in South Africa, it's incredibly prevalent. We're waiting for the government to come and rescue us. We're waiting for politicians. We're waiting for, businesses or whatever. It's you. Like, go out and do cool stuff.
Find yourself and create yourself, which is what I prefer. This is why I like personal leadership. Any other topic, I love teaching on other things, but personal leadership, I just think if you can get that right, there are so many things you can get right. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dudu.
Wisdom is a byproduct of living. We can learn many wisdoms from individuals beyond what they've become known for as their areas of expertise. Human beings are more complex and expansive than the boxes we keep people in. When we put people in boxes, we deprive ourselves of the rich perspectives that they have on a myriad of topics. Hope you have found nuggets of reflection and growth in this conversation. I certainly have. Until next time. Thank you for making time for this episode of Wisdom Personified Conversations with Dudu Msomi. Please like and subscribe to our channel. Click on the bell notification to be informed when our next episode is available. Wisdom Personified Conversations with Dudu Msomi is also now available on Facebook Watch, Apple and Google Podcasts, as well as Spotify. Enjoy the wisdom journey.